It's such an incredible pleasure to spend my sabbatical visiting Adrian's group at Zurich. Delighted to be here in person today. And I'll be talking about the new approach to securing internet communications by strengthening our domain validation protocol using the SCION technology. So I'll begin by highlighting the vulnerability of internet routing today. So the border gateway protocol is not secure, and that means attackers can make malicious BGP announcements to both hijack and intercept internet communications. In the next few slides, I will briefly demonstrate how these routing attacks can have critical consequences for internet applications, including completely undermining the guarantees that we expect from our encryption protocols. This is not the only possible danger. It has also been shown that routing attacks can also undermine cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. So before I go into the demonstration of how routing attacks can impact the encryption of our online communications, let me give a brief background on the notion of a digital certificate. Now, digital certificates are a root of trust for our online communications. In this example, I'm showing a digital certificate belonging to Google.com here. So this certificate presents an authentic binding between the name, Google.com, and its associated public key. So this is signed by trusted entities on the internet, which are known as certificate authorities. So once, as an end user, I have the right digital certificate for a domain that I'm interested in speaking with, like say eth.ch, then I can use this certificate to bootstrap encryption protocols like the ones provided by transport layer security. And those protocols can then in turn provide us with both the confidentiality guarantees as well as the integrity guarantees that we expect when we communicate online. So a key question that arises is how does a domain owner obtain this digital certificate? So imagine that you are in charge of the domain eth.ch, or think about the favorite domain that you have in mind. You can go to a trusted certificate authority like Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is a nonprofit organization and one of the largest certificate authorities in the world. And you can go to Let's Encrypt and you can say, hey, I'm the owner of eth.ch or example.com. I'm interested in obtaining a digital certificate. So Let's Encrypt will say, okay, happy to consider this, but you have to first prove to me that you are actually the owner of this domain. And the way that this proof would work is Let's Encrypt will provide you with a challenge. So this could be a random string. And then if you do control the server associated with your domain, then you could make the necessary modifications in that domain. So these are steps 3, where you go to a particular URL, say eth.ch/verifier.html. You can insert the challenge string in that domain, and then you can let Let's Encrypt know that, okay, I've completed this challenge. Let's Encrypt is smart. This is a good protocol. It won't just directly believe you. It will try to verify itself that you have completed this challenge via step 5 and step 6, where it performs an HTTP GET request to actually validate that you have made the necessary modifications to the domain. And if in step 6, Let's Encrypt gets the necessary challenge string that it provided in step 2 in its response, then it's convinced that you are indeed the owner of this domain, and then it can sign the public key that you have provided. So at this point, you have a digital certificate, and at this point, we can now serve end users and have confidentiality and integrity in our communications. In our research at Princeton University, we observed the key weakness in this protocol, which is that the steps 5 and step 6 are actually not encrypted or authenticated. And you might think that this might just be an oversight by the protocol designers, but it's not. This is actually something very fundamental about this protocol. There is no way to encrypt step 5. There's no way to encrypt step 6, because to do encryption, we need a digital certificate. Right? And this is exactly what we are doing in this protocol. We are obtaining a digital certificate. Right? So this is the bootstrapping phase for internet communications. And the irony of our internet infrastructure today is that that bootstrapping phase itself cannot rely on encryption. This means that if we think about adversaries that have the ability to manipulate our internet routing and our internet communications, then they can actually intercept these messages. and then they can spoof or forge responses to these messages and fraudulently obtain digital certificates. And this can certainly be done by BGP attackers today. So in fact, as part of our research, we set up a real-world infrastructure at Princeton University, which was capable of doing BGP attacks. We did this in a very ethical manner, so we didn't attack any third party. We attacked ourselves. We attacked the IP addresses that we owned. We attacked domains that we owned. So no real users were harmed in our experiments. And to our surprise, every single certificate authority that we trusted, that we considered in our attacks, were found vulnerable. So here's an example of 5 different certificate authorities. I've talked about Let's Encrypt, which is the largest one. Together, at the time of these experiments, these 5 entities owned about 2/3 of the market share for all certificates on the internet today. It was really remarkable that in about 35 seconds, we were able to obtain a digital certificate for an arbitrary domain on the internet. So there was no defense present at the time at which we conducted these experiments. So I want to just take a minute here and pause and let the impact of this slide sink in, that the core foundations of internet encryption are at risk today. So I, as a possible adversary, and we heard about previous presenters talking about some defense context. So think about the worst possible adversary that you can imagine, and then think about that adversary being able to impact the confidentiality and the integrity of your sensitive communications with your favorite bank, with your favorite hospital, and just imagine the consequences of that. Right? It's just no longer just limited to physical spaces like buses where we can eavesdrop on communications. Right? These attacks can happen at internet scale. So these attacks motivated us to think about the design of secure countermeasures to strengthen the domain validation protocol. And for that, we leveraged an insight that the typical type of routing attacks on the internet have an impact that is localized. So what do I mean by that? So if you are the owner of, say, a domain, example.com, and it's hosted at the particular internet prefix, typically if the adversary advertises the same prefix, the internet is split. So roughly, depending on the graph theoretic properties of where in the internet the adversary is making the announcement from some autonomous systems close to the adversary will believe the adversary, some autonomous systems closer to you as the domain owner will believe you. So this slide is depicting the fracture of the internet in terms of different components. The red component here is the hijacked component. The green component here is the unaffected portion. So the insight in designing our defense mechanism was that in addition to performing domain validation from the typical IP address and the typical vantage point that a certificate authority has, why not extend this domain validation protocol to include certain remote vantage points that are globally distributed? And now the idea is that if these vantage points happen to be in areas of the internet that are not affected by the BGP attack, then the adversary will not be able to attack the domain validation protocol at those points. So we can now modify the domain validation protocol and require consistency between not just the primary vantage point run by the certificate authority, but also its remote vantage point. So this redundancy is thereby strengthening protocol design. So we proposed this technology in about 2021, and we were lucky to collaborate with the Let's Encrypt CA to deploy this technology in their production infrastructure. And since then, other entities like Google Trust Services and Cloudflare have also come up with their own deployment. To give you a sense of the scale of our deployment at Let's Encrypt, we've issued about 2 billion digital certificates since our implementation went live in their infrastructure in February of 2020, which is now supporting about 350 million websites. So last time I checked, the whitehouse.gov website was being secured by Let's Encrypt, which was using this technology under the hood. So let's see, let's try to get a quantitative sense for how much this multiple vantage point technology enhances security. So this is perhaps the most technical slide, and I'll keep things simple after this one. On the y-axis, I'm depicting a notion of resilience of the multi-vantage point protocol, which you can think of as the fraction of attackers on the internet which are incapable of attacking a particular domain. So I'm talking about fraction of attackers because the attackers can launch BGP attacks from many different vantage points. Right? They could target a domain from Europe, from US, from Asia, and so on. The red line here is illustrating the strength of the protocol without the multiple vantage point technology in place. So if you look at the median line, if you look at the x equal to 0.5 line, the resilience of the status quo is about 50%, which means about 50% of the attacks will actually succeed in targeting a typical domain. While with the introduction of the multi-VA protocol, and this is specific to Let's Encrypt, we augmented Let's Encrypt's deployment by having vantage points on the US West Coast, the US East Coast, and a vantage point in Frankfurt. So with just 3 vantage points in place, we were able to enhance its resilience to over 90%. Based on the recommendations of this paper, Let's Encrypt is in the process of introducing a new vantage point in Stockholm to further boost up this number. So I think, from one perspective, this represents a success story that we are strengthening the foundations of internet encryption, but observe that we're not able to provide any bulletproof guarantee of security. Right? There's still attackers that could simultaneously attack all of the vantage points that we're using. And if an adversary succeeds in doing that, then the adversary can still obtain a digital certificate for your favorite domain. So in this example, I'm illustrating a type of BGP attack known as a more specific BGP attack, which has a global impact. So you could have a vantage point in Frankfurt, you could have a vantage point in Stockholm, you can have a vantage point in the US. These types of global attacks can have an impact on all of those vantage points. So this means an adversary might be in a position to intercept communications from these vantage points and spoof responses and obtain a digital certificate. So this became a starting point for an exciting conversation with Adrian earlier this semester, and we started to think about how we can leverage secure backbones like SCION to strengthen the guarantees of the multi-VA protocol. Of course, in the conventional internet, BGP hijacks and interceptions don't have a good solution. But the beauty of the SCION protocol is that it provides a cryptographically secured control plane to fundamentally address the threat of routing attacks. Right? So that makes it a really elegant platform for designing security-oriented application. And today we have SCION-enabled ISPs. We heard about the exciting deployment and growth of the SCION network, such that certificate authorities like Let's Encrypt, in theory, could then sign up for a remote vantage point to integrate SCION with their multi-VA solution. So here, that's what I'm depicting in this slide today. So the picture here is the current status quo at Let's Encrypt, where they have the certificate authority vantage points. They have some other vantage points, but not in SCION. So I'm calling them vulnerable vantage points because, in theory, they're vulnerable to BGP attacks. There's not a mathematical guarantee of hijack resilience. But if Let's Encrypt or any other certificate authority knows that a particular domain is hosted in SCION, and this could be enabled via DNS-related signaling mechanisms, then we can leverage vantage points that are hosted in native SCION infrastructure. And through the cryptographic control plane guarantees of the SCION protocol, we can then ensure that the communications between the secure vantage points and the SCION-enabled domain cannot be hijacked. Right? So if a domain is hosted in SCION, we can now turn the resilience of multi-VA into, in fact, a cryptographic guarantee of security against external BGP level attackers. So we think this is a really promising direction to fundamentally secure internet communications. We're also thinking about integration of SCION into multi-VA, even in contexts where the domain might not be hosted on SCION. So this is what we are illustrating in the next slide here. So the domain in here is not in SCION. There can still be some benefits that certificate authorities like Let's Encrypt might enjoy by having their secure vantage points be part of the SCION infrastructure, because the connection from the secure vantage point to the egress point of the SCION network is still protected against routing attacks. So this still reduces the probability that an adversary will be able to hijack communications between a secure vantage point and a domain not in the SCION network. Of course, CS can also benefit from all of the exciting energy efficiency and performance properties of the SCION network. So I'll conclude my presentation here just by saying that I'm sure we all want to see a world in which our communications have the trust embedded to achieve confidentiality, to achieve integrity against network layer attacks. And to do that, we have to fundamentally fix the internet domain validation protocol. And while multiple vantage point domain validation enhances the resilience of that approach, it doesn't provide a cryptographic guarantee against attacks. And combining that with SCION for SCION-hosted domains can turn that enhanced resilience into a notion of cryptographic assurance that I find really exciting. Of course, this idea is also incrementally deployable. And even for domains that are not SCION-hosted, this approach can provide performance benefits. Thank you.